And thank you very much to Professor Floberger and to all of my colleagues here today. Now, I did talk, my original topic was prospects for Turkish-US relations in the Trump administration, but I think in light of the recent developments in the war with Israel and Iran, that changes really everything. And I am welcome, particularly to Asli Hanım, any thoughts on what I say and whether you have reactions to my colleagues in terms of what the implications of this development is, because this is quite a earth-shaking development. So I'm going to kind of like run through along the abstract that I prepared, but at the same time hit maybe the more recent issues. I've been covering and following this issue for many, many years, and it really has gone through many iterations. But this one is really a shock to the system, and what does it mean? Overall, I think we have a new trajectory obviously in the Middle East, with the at least putative decline of Iran. What does that mean for Turkey? And of course, observers are looking at this, and I think we all believe that there's an opportunity for the ascent for Turkey and Turkey, but Turkey's position in the region is, if you notice, Turkey took a very stood back a bit from becoming involved in this conflict in terms of its comments, in terms of its interactions. So I think my feeling about it was that Turkey was adopting, even when the war started between Israel, Iran, and then the American bombing of the three facilities, took a wait and see approach to see what would be the result of the war. And the truth of the matter is, we're not really sure what the result of the war is. We really don't know the extent of the attacks, how long this has delayed the Iranian nuclear program, what is the implication for the leadership in Iran, many questions about the region, about it's really in a state of flux and great confusion. And even domestically, a tremendous debate has occurred with respect to the question of whether Trump was authorized under the War Powers Act, which I believe he is absolutely authorized to have undertaken these hostilities. I'm happy to comment on it. I think it's very clear that the War Powers Act has never limited any president of the United States. No president has ever agreed to be subject to the War Powers Act, and accordingly, I believe it is constitutional. But in any event, they kind of moved from the War Powers Act to dealing with the so-called Big Beautiful Bill, which the president is signing today, which happens to be American Independence Day. And so this is a very, very pivotal date for the United States. So starting with Turkish-US relations. Turkish-US relations, interestingly, are really improving tremendously. And at least on the presidential level, President Trump is very complimentary of President Erdogan, has invited him to Washington. I think that the main trajectory of the Turks is to be able to remove the sanctions that were placed at the end of the first Trump administration and to facilitate the acquisition of F-16s and F-16 parts, and also the ability of Turkey to renew its position in the F-35 program. From, in effect, it was ejected. Turkey paid for its participation in the program, but when it took the S-400s from Russia, it then, there was the National Defense Authorization Act, and the Congress mandated that the president must impose sanctions on Turkey. Those sanctions that were imposed were probably I would say on the menu of sanctions, really the least level of sanctions. Nevertheless, they are in place. So that dialogue and that movement is going along. And that sort of segues into Syria, where Turkey has really been very pivotal player, and Syria plays a big role in Turkey's policy in the sense that the more than 3 million refugees in Turkey, Syrian refugees, Turkey wants to return those to Syria, wants to stabilize the Syrian regime. And al-Shara, amazingly, has been able to facilitate the removal of sanctions by the United States on Syria. And, you know, I think that is rather other remarkable things. We saw Trump meeting with al-Shara. We know that the developments that have occurred in Syria are no less than remarkable in the sense that you had 25 or 30,000 jihadis coming and taking over the Assad regime, which, by the way, I think was facilitated and made possible by Israel because Israel took out Hezbollah, Israel took out Iran's defenses, and Israel and Russia, which has bases in Syria, was distracted with Ukraine. So, by an interesting confluence of events, the 25 to 30,000 HTS jihadis were able to take power. Now, the question in Syria presents itself because you have the Syrian Kurds or YPG and the PYD, which Turkey takes the position that this is allied with the PKK. The United States does not have the YPG and the PYD on its terror list, and as a fact, in fact, the CENTCOM, American CENTCOM, fights with the Syrian Kurds against ISIS and so forth. So a very tricky situation. How to stabilize the regime in Syria. And we even see some, again, another incredible developments where al-Shara is the possibility of, people say, I don't know if it's correct, that Syria might join the Abraham Accords, Syria might form some sort of relationship with Israel. These are things that were been inconceivable if we had this conversation weeks or months ago. Nobody would have said that such a discussion would be possible. So the question is, what happens with HTS, with al-Shara? What happens with its relationship with Turkey, with Qatar, with Saudi Arabia? The purpose, stabilizing the regime. And I mean, I think that al-Shara has presented himself as a very, I think, again, we don't know what he is. I mean, again, Americans are very perplexed by him. He looks good. He dresses nicely. In fact, I'm going to try to dress like him with a nice turtleneck and a jacket, and a nicely trimmed beard. He's a terrific looking guy. And he's a real fashion statement. He should, walk the red carpet. But the point is that, and the Turks have helped tremendously in facilitating and helping with that image. But for real, what is his view? And really the problem is the foreign fighters in Syria. We could do a separate thing on Syria, and obviously the massacres of Druzes and Christians and obviously Alawites is not acceptable, and the United States will not help al-Shara stabilize the regime if that continues. So that's a fraught situation. I would say the Kurds, just a word on the Kurds, they talk about the peace process in Turkey, which is with Öcalan putting down the PKK arms. This is all quite amazing. And what's most amazing about it, and here's the thing, again, amazing list of amazing things, is that it was Bahçeli of the MHP, the most nationalist party, who came up with the suggestion and said, I met with Öcalan and he's going to do this and the PKK. But again, inconceivable things. So I think that the whole, again, the region is in tremendous flux and confusion. Right now we have a ceasefire. We don't know how that's going to develop. I think Prime Minister Netanyahu is coming to meet with Trump. And that takes me to almost the last point. I see about a couple of minutes more, is to talk about President Trump. Because if you want to understand American foreign policy today, I think it's President Trump. If you want to understand the direction of American policy, Donald Trump. You have Marco Rubio as the National Security Advisor and the Secretary of State. That's what. He's also the head of the I think he's the head also of the archives. I mean, he has about 10 jobs, which used to be all held by different people. But that's President Trump. And we know that, and I would say, and if I could sum up President Trump like this, I don't know how many. I went on one roller coaster with my father when I was a little boy, and I didn't like it, and it was scary. Okay. But to be with American, you get on the roller coaster, you put on the seatbelt, and you go for the ride. And it goes up and down, and you never know where it's going to go. Who knows tomorrow? Maybe there'll be a peace agreement on Gaza. Who knows tomorrow? Whether there could be an end of the Ukraine war? We don't know. We don't know. But again, I do think, and again, I certainly don't speak for all Americans because we are very, very polarized. But as far as shaking up the structure, shaking things up, Trump has taken many of our predetermined, pre-existing ideas and broken them in pieces, almost like Humpty Dumpty fell off the wall. We couldn't put it together. We just break up the piece of pottery, right? And it's just figuring out where we're going. I mean, you would never have predicted that, all the things that he's done with the border, all the things that he's done in the Middle East, all the things that he's done are just game changers one after the other. I mean, the Democrats are not in favor. And I want to say this other thing about Turkey-US relations, and that's also important. If you notice, there's complete polarization in the Congress, right? The big, beautiful bill, all the Democrats voted against it, and 2 Republicans. It just passed the House. All the Republicans, less 2. It passed the Senate. Admittedly, it was a tie, and the vice president broke the tie. On Turkey, there is significant antipathy in Congress for Turkey because we do have very significant lobbies that lobby against Turkey, and that's our system. Our system operates with constituents and lobbies and interest groups and election cycles that are very, very short. So basically, Congress is very, very important, especially with these sanctions and all these other things, so that you have to look at U.S. politics as very, very trifurcated. I don't know if that's the right word, if there's such a word. We have a Congress, we have a presidency, and a judiciary. And in my conclusion, I would say that American politics, the judiciary has had an incredible influence on this balance of power, this separation of powers, this checks and balances. So to understand, and again, to really conclude, Tip O'Neill, our Speaker of the House, said all politics is local. And that's true in Turkey. It's true in America. It's true everywhere. And that's the dynamic that is going to fuel the future relations between the United States and Turkey, the issue of Iran and Israel, relations with Europe, and on will be fueled very much by the domestic politics and this domestic movement. And in the last words, President Trump. And thank you. I think 15 minutes on my clock. I believe I honored what you had, Dr. Ploberger. Thank you very much.